right. Welcome to NX Conf. I'm super excited to be able to be up here, giving a talk, opening the conference, giving the keynote together with Victor, who's joining me later. And so it's the third edition. I just looked it up before the talk. Actually, if you want to be precise, it's probably be the 3.5 edition. We have like a light edition last year, which was just online. So for those that don't know me, my name is Juri Strumpflohner. I'm the Senior Director of Developer Experience at Nx. So I help steer the future direction of Nx, make sure developer experience fits, the developers have a good time using Nx. And I do also a lot of content around Nx, a lot of educational content. And yes, I also get paid for making weird faces on YouTube as well. So there's that. So when I talk to folks online at conferences, at meetups, but also like on our social channels, especially new ones that kind of start using Nx, they're asking like, what is Nx exactly? Like I tried it out, but it does a lot of different things. So what is it? And a lot of them come to monorepos immediately. And that's legit because that's where we started. That's our main strength. So we work with a lot of Fortune 500 companies to really help them scale their massive code bases and help them be more productive. But Nx is actually embedded in a huge ecosystem of different tools that are currently in the web, in the front-end space, but not only. And while you can drop Nx right now on almost any monorepo or single project workspace to have faster task running, get better ergonomics, the real value that Nx also provides is integrating it with all those different tools. Like, I guess we're all developers here. So you know how hard it is to integrate these tech stacks to make sure that they are updated and they work in a coherent way, such that you can actually focus on what really matters, that is producing features. And this works with Angular. This works obviously with React. We're also working with different like React meta frameworks, and currently also starting to work on actually having such nice integration with Vue, as well as we've been asked a lot of times to do that. Now, this is just one part, the actual integration of those different technologies. But if you start developing, it's not always about just the speed, right? So Nx is really great in terms of speed, in terms of caching, making sure CI is fast. But scaling development can also be on actual developer end to scale development teams, right? So if you have a single workspace, what Nx can provide you there is be able to modularize such a workspace into some more fine-grained libraries, some more cohesive units. And that helps with maintainability over time. And then you integrate clearly all of those different technologies. Like you might have Playwright for your end-to-end testing or Cypress, or you might have identified some sort of library which is just responsible for like having your UI components. And so you add Storybook on top of that. And again, that works for Vue, or that will be working for Vue, that works for Angular, that works for React. And clearly what also works in a single workspace works in a monorepo. So that's where we started, right? So what we added to Nx is a way to have those single workspaces to work really well. But once you grow and you see actually now we might need multiple applications, you can actually automatically expand to such a monorepo. So that's really one of the key points where Nx allows you to start small and then grow over time with you as your code base scales up from a pure development perspective. And clearly, again, this works with Angular, this works with different frameworks, even backend frameworks, even non-JavaScript frameworks. So right now we have good integration, for instance, with a lot of different Node.js parts, and we're currently expanding that right now. And we've seen a lot of people take benefit of that, because now they can have really end-to-end type safety, because they can share certain aspects between a backend, which might be JavaScript-based, and their front-end code. So I've come to the conclusion that Nx is much more than just monorepos. It's literally the goat of developer productivity. Like that's what we're focusing on. And yeah, if you're wondering about this, is actually Jeff's goat. So it's a real picture from that one. We actually have on our docs, we have a page that explains more those aspects. So why Nx, what benefit it gives you. It has also a more deep dive video on walking through the different features that might be interesting for you in your workspace. Now, we have a really high bar when it comes to engineering quality, right? We want to ship really high quality software, but as part of that, we also want to ship high quality educational content around it. So make sure that people actually know the cool features that we implement and how to best use them for their specific situation, their company, or their open source project. And so I'm going to talk a bit about the different aspects where we optimize such educational content right now. And obviously, the entry point here are the Nx docs. So in the last year, we actually did quite some restructuring on those docs to make them more cohesive between them, to make them more, let's say, atomic and have a real concrete responsibility for each of those articles that we have on there. And we've been using a framework that's called diataxis, which is kind of just a way, if you want, to assign a responsibility to each article and clearly separate them. So as you can see, there is like more on the left-hand side, the learning and study-oriented things, so that's tutorial explanations. And on the right-hand side, there's more the how-to guide. So I have a concrete problem and I want to know how to solve that. And so on our docs, if you kind of compare that right now with the diataxis framework, what we have done is actually clearly separate our tutorials. So we have some in-depth tutorials that really walk you through step by step, so you can dive in, sit down for half an hour, and actually learn something new. We also have a section that goes into the core features and concepts around Nx, and that's when you kind of use Nx, but you want to understand more about how does the caching work, what is the actual like mental model behind Nx, what are the more inner workings, so you can just dive in and read through some of that stuff. And then again, as mentioned, there's the more practical approach, where you have a specific issue. You want to configure Nx on CI with GitHub Actions, and so there is a whole recipe section with step-by-step guidance to actually just give you that solution and as fast as possible, so without further fluff around it. And finally, there's the reference. So I guess it's kind of like the API docs that we kind of try to split out in a more concrete way. We can literally just go and look up what are the API endpoints that those packages expose, what are the commands that I can run in the executors or generators, and you can dive into that way. Then we also improved the whole intro experience for new folks. That's mostly for those that have heard about Nx and want to get started with it. So we revamped our intro page, which just lists a couple of the big core features with then further links to those sections if you want to explore those. And then clearly there's a way to just go and explore yourself. Just run that command, create an Nx workspace. It has some sort of like step-by-step guidance through it, and you just set it up and get going. There's a whole section then below it now, which just emphasizes one of our main tutorials. So to get started, for instance, the Nx overview video, Nx Cloud overview, how you can integrate it into current monorepo and to our YouTube channel, and some of the core tutorials that we want to highlight around package-based monorepos, React setups, and Angular. And then there's a whole section about examples. So really worked hard here to create small examples like GitHub repos with some instructions for those tech stacks where we don't have a plugin right now, like a native Nx plugin. But Nx is quite flexible, so you can still make it work in a lot of those cases. So here you see, for instance, a lot of examples like how to use Nx with Nuxt, or even with Svelte or Dino, or outside Nx, outside JavaScript ecosystem, like Rust and Go and .NET. And so these are definitely nice to explore and kind of see how you can leverage Nx there. And then obviously we cannot all start with like a greenfield project. So there's a whole section that kind of shows you how to migrate over to Nx. Many of them have even automated scripts. So you just run Nx init, and it will bring your workspace over to an Nx workspace, and then you can go ahead from there on. The next one is our Nrwl Blog. And this is still Nrwl. We are going through a rebranding. So right now it's on blog.nrwl.io. That's where we share kind of in-depth tutorials where you can walk through step by step, or just announce new features. It's interesting engineering parts, like we have also some articles on there, how do we optimize, for instance, linting, made that faster. So it's more like an engineering blog where you can go on and kind of read through of those things. We also cross-post to dev.io because I personally like it very much, and a lot of people are on there as well. So a lot of our articles are being cross-posted to that as well. Another thing where we are really proud of and really try to push a lot, because people seem to actually really enjoy it, is our YouTube channel. So it's on NX DevTools. By the way, if you didn't subscribe yet, now is the moment where you can take a picture and subscribe. But that's basically where we have different forms of videos. We have a lot of like short form videos, which are a couple minutes to like 5 minutes, to also like the longer form videos, which are like half an hour, for instance, where you can really like walk through in depth. And we have all the release videos up there. So whenever we do a release, even minor releases, we usually kind of summarize them and walk you through the main features that might be interesting to you. And the YouTube channel really grew a lot. Like, this is our lifetime growth. So we have now 1.7 million views and almost 40,000 subscribers. So maybe we can get there today. And this is like, I just checked up last week. We have like the last 28 days, we had like 3.7K watch time hours. And so that's almost 5 months in 28 days that people on YouTube and watch it. Now, this is not like Jack Harrington dimensions, which is also sitting here in the audience, but we're really proud about it. So we really try to push it forward, and people enjoy it. Like, we get a lot of positive feedback and good comments that kind of make us push forward. And clearly, this isn't only possible with the community, all right? So Nx has always been open source. This is where we started at, and we really want to have that grow and push forward. We have a dedicated page on nx.dev/community where you can kind of see some of the entry points where you can start interacting with us and interact with the rest of the community. One of the big drivers has been definitely the Nrwl community Slack. This has been a Slack channel that has been created by the community, by Jay Bell, which unfortunately today couldn't be here. But he started that, and he had that grow over time. And if you look at those numbers, they're really crazy. Like, it's 9,000 people over there, around 600 people that are active on a weekly basis. Now, when you look at this chart, you might be wondering, what is going on here? Should we be worried? This is actually legit. So the reason why this goes down is because we started migrating to Discord. Now, Discord is really great for building community. Like, it has a lot of features that are really valuable to us. And we struggled quite a while to actually, should we migrate, shouldn't we do it? But now, actually, a couple of weeks ago, we did the move. The Slack channel is still active. We'll still keep it up for a while to actually give people the opportunity to close down some open discussions and slowly migrate over. But we already see some good numbers. Like, this is from yesterday, I think. We are already over 1,000 subscribed members on that Discord, which we opened a couple of weeks ago, 3-4 weeks ago. So it's growing really fast, and we're really happy about that, to see people come over from the Slack community. So again, definitely go there and sign up. It's on go.nx.dev/community. And for us, this is a way to just interact with folks, ask questions, help out each other. And one of the main reasons we also went to Discord is because it has a dedicated form of functionality. And so that really helps, because now we have a more structured way of asking questions and replying to those questions. We can categorize them based on different tech stack you're using, and we can also search them later on. And so that's really helpful for people to actually find out more and go in and maybe already find a solution that they were searching for. And it has some cool features, because we can have people know about live events that we're doing, like this one here, for instance. We also have weekly live chats on YouTube where we invite people to join us and talk through an hour through it, kind of like a podcast format, but with hands-on coding. And so this is a way for letting people know about that, because before it was kind of hard. If someone wasn't too much into YouTube, they wouldn't have known. And another thing I'm super proud about that we finally launched it is the Nx Champions program. And so we had that in the planning for a while, and this year we actually then kicked it off and got it going. We actually have quite some champions around here, some in the form of emceeing, some speaking later on, a lot of them joining online. So here on this page, you see some of them. There's actually a bunch more. And we want to keep growing that program. And these are basically just people that are super excited about Nx, that have shown that they help out the community. They're there in the forums to answer questions. They produce content online. And they basically advocate for Nx and help us grow our community in a friendly way. So if you're interested, this is kind of like the making of a champion. There's also a link to apply. Definitely chime in and let us know if you're curious about that. So the whole theme basically has been mostly in the recent months or so, and going forward from now on, to connect and resurface some of the information that we already have around. So there's a bunch of information that we have in terms of conference talk that we are giving on various conferences. We ourselves, our champions, but also the community, we have all those videos on YouTube. We have courses on Egghead and other platforms on Pluralsight. We have our blog. We have our changelog. So there's a lot of information which we actually want to bring together. So a lot of the effort that we have been doing in the last year and going forward now is to connect these informations. And so, for instance, on most of the docs pages right now, you will see at the top one of the primary videos that covers the same concept of the doc page, also in a video format for those people that like watching rather than reading. So it's the idea is to have something for everyone there. Also, our tutorials have the same version of the tutorial as the walkthrough tutorial in video format. And we even went further in the sense of where you can start scrolling through the tutorial, but at some point you might want to actually jump into the video. So we have on each section a link where you can click, and it will bring you to that point in the video. So you can go on from there and code alongside with whoever teaches that tutorial. We also created a new changelog page, which is kind of the point where we then reference our announcement blog posts, videos that we create for dedicated features that got released on a specific version of Nx. So this is a way, again, for you to go in and browse and see what happened and find out new things that that might have been released that you mightn't know about. Cool. So I have also a couple of announcements. One is that we definitely want to move the blog over to Nx.dev. So that is something that started on my flight here to the conference. So it's pretty new. And it is mainly because there's some things on Medium, actually a couple of things on Medium, we don't really like as much. And we don't have a lot of control over, right? So there's a paywall, which sometimes blocks you out, and we don't want to have that. Now, we have the cross-post, obviously, to dev.to, but still we want to have that on our own page. And so if you go right now there, this is what you will see. It's mostly links back to our current blog posts, like the blog platforms, so Medium and dev.to and our YouTube channel. But over the next couple of weeks, you will see this being built up, and then it will be integrated into the docs, meaning it will also be integrated into the search of the blog, of the docs page, to again resurface the same information for you there. And then there's another announcement which also kind of ties into this, which is we're experimenting right now with your Nx AI companion. And so what that means, and you can actually go right now to this URL, is there is like an ChatGPT-based chat that we integrate into our docs that we have been testing out in the last couple of months. We have tested it with our champions, and now we're opening it up in beta for everyone out there. So we want to kind of keep improving that over in the next couple weeks and months. And it's basically a way for you to get a customized documentation page. So this chat has been trained on our documentation content. And so basically, if you go there and ask, like, how can I migrate from create React app to Nx, it will give you like a structured documentation page that looks exactly the same as our docs, but filtered out of different pages. And the cool part is, like, we include the sources there, right? So at the bottom, you can see the different articles from where the content has been extracted. And that's important, right? Don't blindly trust AI. So it's kind of like a way for you to help. But then if you want to dig deeper, you have those links from the source, and you can then just dive in and explore. So definitely try it out. There's buttons there to upvote and downvote based on how satisfied you are with the answer, and we're monitoring that. And based on that, that's good feedback for us to keep improving that chatbot over time, such that it's really valuable. So to conclude, this is our repo. Again, Nx is open source, meaning come and participate, and that can be from contributing to the docs, it can be from helping us triage issues, opening PRs. So definitely chime in and participate, and while you're there, don't forget to help us harvest some stars in GitHub. Hit that star button. Cool. So that's it from my side. I'm now super proud to welcome on stage Victor Savkin, which is giving you the second part of the keynote. Thanks.
Thank you, Juri. All right, can you hear me? Okay, cool. Okay, so I usually pick a person I'm staring at through the whole keynote, so it's easier for me to Jeff, not today. Okay, so, so I feel like I'm explaining to like a real person. Ben happened to be right there, so thank you, Ben. So I'm Victor, right, and I'm the CTO and the co-founder of Nx, right? And I've been working on build tools and frameworks for JavaScript for a very long time, and I want to show you something cool today. So let's begin. This is a painting of me. Here we go. I look handsome. Okay, so there are costs everywhere you look, right? So somewhere in the middle, no matter organization, right, you will see the actual, quote-unquote, the actual work being done, right? The stuff that you want to ship, the artifact you want to produce, right? And all around it is like infra, management, coordination, right? And the bigger the org gets, the more the supporting work, right, gets, right? Something that could have been, a day worth of work in terms of decision making now can take weeks or months, right? And that's just what happens. And you see this cost, the supporting work cost in small orgs, even in small org. Right? But when you go to a larger org, even if it's an exceptionally well-functioning large org, right? And I worked at some, like I think Google is a good well-functioning large org, right? You see that cost ballooning, right? Somewhere in the middle, there is the same amount of work. A designer has to design a page, right? And some developer has to put the page together, but it takes 10 times as long, right? And it's not just communication or management, the things that people like to not like, right? So any create artifact, right, that you produce has to be integrated into the outside context, right? Integrate code-wise, process-wise. The whole supporting thing is the integration cost that you have to pay, right? And this cost obviously is not unique to software. If you try to hire a contractor to fix your house, it's a nightmare, right? You talk to 10 different people. There are a lot of cost around it, right? For this, poor guy to, to do something, right? It's just what happens, right? We all recognize it. It's so common, right? We have memes about it, like this, right? But the memes get it wrong, right? I think the memes imply that everyone around does nothing, just stares at the worker, right? Where in the real world, I think the managers, product managers, agile coaches and stuff, right? They actually do real work, right? And that they support this complex system, right, with many people. And that coordination work is very important, it's very hard, right? And that's why you can see remote work movement that started some time ago. It's kind of, not succeeding necessarily because it requires a lot more effort to make this coordination piece work in a remote context, right? And that's why small companies like ours, right, could often outperform larger companies because that supporting work bracket is smaller for us, right? It's more painful in software compared to other industries because in software, programmers have insane amount of leverage, right? If nothing is in the way and the tech supports what you want to do, and everything is right? You can do amazing things in a matter of weeks, right? So Ken Thompson over there, who's in the picture sitting, wrote the first version of Unix famously in a month, right? Same programmers, not like Ken Thompson, but like a programmer, right, could easily be 10 times more productive and create as much output, right, if they have the tools supporting what they want to do, right? So the range of output is exceptionally high from, being stuck for months to delivering an insane amount of work, right? Which is not the case in other industries. Like in construction, 20 construction workers aren't going to build a skyscraper. In software, though, that is the case, right? If you have 20 engineers who have no obstacles, right, they can do an interesting thing, right? In his book, Doom Guy, this is John Romero, right, talks about early days of id Software, and how they could release 12 games per year, right? And it was exceptionally high result, right? And they could do it because they reduced the supporting cost to basically zero, right? They scoped everything, and nothing was in the way, right? So they were able to do it. And you could say, that's more of a cultural thing, it's not a tech thing, right? It's an organizational problem, not a tech problem. But I think the whole dichotomy is bogus, right? If you have an organization where the tech doesn't support what you want to do, it just doesn't work. And if you have wonderful technology, but everyone hates each other, things also don't work out, right? So the arrows point both directions. You need good tech, but of course you need organizational support as well. Okay. So Alan Kay, who I also very like very much, he had this quote that is very famous, which is a change of perspective is worth 80 IQ points, right? And this is not to be taken literally. What it means is that basically, if you look at 400 years ago or 300 years ago and stuff like that, it would require the genius of Newton and Leibniz to do that today, right? These days, any high school or most high school students could do, right? And high school students could do it today because they have the apparatus of calculus at their disposal. Because they have calculus, they could do amazing things that only very few could do a few centuries ago, right? So Nx won't make you John Carmack, programming-wise, right? It would be awesome if it did, but it just won't. Okay, just accept it, right? And knowing basic calculus won't make you Leibniz. Or note Leibniz over Newton, hashtag Team Leibniz, right? But I do believe that the right model and tools in place can help your team of regular people like myself, right, scale projects a lot better. So you can solve a lot more hard problems effectively, right, as you can do with calculus in math and stuff, right? So that's my motto for the company. That is not a real thing, but kind of keep in mind where can we make developers at big companies building large projects as productive as developers in the early days of id, right? Like a joking mission statement, but it kind of works, okay? And let's look at CI, for example, right? CI is an interesting domain, right? So let's see what we can do here, okay? So let's look at the history of CI first, because history is, is always interesting, right? And it's worth noting how new the idea of CI is. In general, engineering is very new. We don't really have much history, right, in software. But CI is newer than more things. Like we have object-oriented programming, functional programming for 60 years, right? CI is 20 years old, right? It's a very new idea. The mid-90s, Grady Butch, you can see over there, right? Writes about it in his book. Then late 90s, Beck and Fowler write about it, and a lot of it comes out from the extreme programming movement, which was very helpful, I think, for us, right? And 2001, Cruise Control comes out of ThoughtWorks, which was the first, I think, widely used CI system. Then Hudson I use Hudson, right? In 2005, it comes out from Sun, SoundMaker Systems. Then a bunch of other projects appear, Bamboo, Travis CI in 2010, a big deal. The first like so cloud first or cloud focused CI, right? Systems and Jenkins and Circle. Jenkins is interesting because it's a fork of Hudson, because some dispute with Oracle, but doesn't matter. So that's why you can see they're very similar, Hudson and Jenkins. If you don't know Hudson, it's basically Jenkins, right? But just slightly different, right? So a lot has happened in this 20-year history. There was some innovation. For example, we moved from running CI on a fixed agent to cloud, to using ephemeral agents, right? I remember in my when I was a little Victor, right? We used the same CI agent. You had like artifact from previous CI runs just left over. So nothing was ever reproduced. It was tricky, right? We got the idea of using CI as like config as code, right? Now the CI configuration is usually stored in a repo, things like that, right? So a lot of cool things happened. So, but the core model, I think, for a lot of projects remains the same, right? And the core model works like this, right? We have an event that happens. An event can be a commit gets pushed, or a human being, hopefully, right, pushes a button, and the CI runs, right? And then the CI system, regardless of what the system is, reacts to it, and it basically looks at the event, knows where it's coming from, downloads the config, and the config contains detailed description of what the CI system has to do with this run, right? It basically tells the CI system it's going to be 5 machines that will run in certain order, some in parallel, some sequentially, and it gives a detailed recipe for each machine. So you get like a detailed flow for your CI, right, with every machine being outlined with a detailed recipe for every machine, right? And in some way, it's kind of similar to what we used to do by hand, right, where you would have a few engineers before release sitting, a few, maybe very many engineers, right, sitting together, right? They have a printout of test cases. They would go through test cases, and when the test case passed on their machine, they would say, things are good, and then someone else later on will be like, okay, everyone is saying things are good. Let me push stuff to QA. I actually worked in an org that did that once. It was crazy, right? It was crazy because most of the time things were not good and would still push to it. So it was a very loose check, right? And that, of course, is a lot more complex than a real project, right? So if you work on a very big project in an enterprise, you could easily have 50 agents running your CI, right? That's not that crazy. It happens, right? And each of those has to be configured, right? So each machine has to do some stuff. The order has to be there, preserved. Things have to make sense, right? And this picture looks complex, but however complex it is, it actually could work for a repository that is fixed. As in, like, every time you run CI for that repository, the whole recipe makes sense, right? So if you always run the same thing, you can have a complex system. It's a bit weird, right? But it still makes sense. It doesn't make sense for monorepos, right? Because monorepos just don't work this way. In a monorepo, you don't have a fixed project in a fixed single project in a workspace, right? You have many of them. This is, for example, a relatively small monorepo, actually. This is the Nx repo. And 3 types of changes, you can see, right? Real changes, depending on what you touch in a repo, what your PR does. You can have orders of magnitude, different requirements for how much compute you're going to run in CI, right? So it could be 50 times more compute required in some PRs compared to others, right? So when you have that, and 50 times not even that crazy, right? If you look at a real large org, the difference can be even bigger, right? So no fixed recipe will ever work for a setup like this, right? You always either run too much compute, wasting money and compute, right? Or things will be slow, right? And obviously, the bigger your repo gets, the worse it becomes, right? And that's the problem overall, right? The problem is that the CI right now that most of us use, right, is machine-oriented. It doesn't have to be a physical machine, but it's still there, right? You're saying, build this machine, run these instructions, set it up in a certain way, run this command on this machine, take some artifact from this machine, upload to some other machine, right? It's a problem. It's very low level. As a result, it requires maintenance. Like, we work with a lot of team working on CI and large orgs. It's a lot of maintenance. And it's removed from what developer wants. No developer wants to manage 50 machines, right? And say, okay, this one run, build app 1, but only, like, it's just no one's dream, right? And it doesn't work for monorepos. It doesn't work well. And the bigger your monorepo is, the bigger the mismatch, right? So the result is that because it's a hard problem, right? In every organization, there are super smart developers who love to work on making CI fast, right? It's like, because smart engineers like to work on hard problems, it's just what happens, right? And not to offend folks, but this is not what should happen, right? It's a mismatch of the skill and the activity, right? organizations shouldn't be doing it. This is One Punch Man. You should watch it. Very good. Like many organizations, like if you imagine an organization that builds a custom editor setup, right, for their needs. I mean, some people do. Like people like to do NeoVim stuff, and God bless them. So, but generally speaking, organizations don't do it, and for good reason, right? It's not a good use of your time. Someone else can do it for you. You need to focus on something else, right? So that's the message. Okay. So let me show you what can be done instead. Right. So here I have a workspace with 5 applications. Those are Next.js applications, and each of those applications is built out of like a few important features, right? You can think of it like those libraries are basically like screens or something like that built by your team, right? And then those applications can share some libraries as well, okay? So some UI, data fetching stuff like that, right? So it should be quite recognizable for any enterprise, like multiple teams, lines of business, different lines of business, different specific stuff, stuff that you share, right? Nothing super crazy, right? So we can look at the project graph of this workspace to see visually how it looks. So hopefully, those of you who work at banks and stuff, right, will be like, okay, this is exactly what we have, because this is what I see every time I Zoom with our clients, right? Okay, this repo is a bit too regular, right? It's a fake repo, so obviously you won't have this perfectly balanced tree. It's going to be a mess, right? But generally speaking, you have something that is the artifact, an application or module, a set of your specific features for your team, a set of shared features, right? Nothing crazy, right? And so let's see why it's hard to build a CI for a repo like this. This is actually a simple repo. Most of our clients have much more complex repos. This is a simplified example. So let's look at the CI difficulties, right? I'm going to visualize the task graph over here. So the reason why it's difficult is if I want to run end-to-end test for one of my applications, right, what I would have to do in this case is to export, create an artifact for the application first, build it, and to build my application, I have to build all the shared libraries first, right? And it has to be done in order. And when I build my shared libraries, I have to grab the files that I create and move it to a different machine that builds the application. Like I cannot do it on one machine because it will be too slow. So I have to figure out a mechanism for distributing those files. And once I build my application with all the shared libraries I moved, right, I have to take those artifacts and move it to another machine that's going to export it, etc. And then once I get the stuff that I export, I also need to move it to a machine that is going to run end-to-end test against that application, right? This is a simple case. In a real case, you're going to have much more convoluted stuff. This is too regular, right? So even in this simple case, it's actually quite tricky, right? So if you imagine writing CI config for that stuff, if you use Jenkins, people like to, criticize Jenkins a bit, but it's actually possible to do it with Jenkins. It won't be super fast. It will be clunky, but it will kind of work, right? You can stash and stash stuff. You can actually make it, force it into being, right? It's not impossible, right? It's actually harder to do it with more modern tools because they're more constrained than Jenkins. Right? Jenkins is a mighty sword. They can cut through lots of stuff, right? So it's hard to do. We're looking at thousands of lines of Groovy. Some Uber team of engineers has to maintain, right? To kind of make it work, let alone make it work efficiently, make it work fast, and just enjoyable to use, right? If we look at the configuration required to do it with Cloud Workflows, which is the feature that we ship right now, right, for and use ourselves, the configuration is much smaller, right? We simply need to set up what we need to set up, and then we need to run the commands we want to run, right? There is no, this is the whole config. I mean, it's a fake repo, so imagine it won't be 12 lines, it will be like 50 lines, right? But we are looking at a small number of lines that describe the whole CI pipeline for this repo that will do everything that is required over here, all right? And that's kind of where the magic is, right? So you can get it to a much, much smaller number, right? And remove all the complexity that you would have to, if possible, right, put in your CI config. So what will happen? So this is my repo. I push a change to GitHub, right? Once I push a change to GitHub, Nxcloud is going to recognize, there is a change over there. Let me allocate 10 agents to run the change. You can, and the setup steps, it would derive them from your configuration and figure out what you need to do, right? It's going to do the cloning and stuff, right? You don't have to look at the setup steps. It's mostly useful for debugging, right? I'm just showing to you there, right? Each pill over here on the UI, you can see represents an agent, like a machine. Right? 10 machine is not that high, but it's sufficient for this toy repo, right? And once everything setup-wise is going to be done, you're going to see the commands we had in the configuration appear at the top, right? Because the actual commands will start running. Okay, they're here. if I want to explore and see what exactly is going on with all these agents, what exactly they're doing, I can expand it and see what tasks they're running, right? And this is mostly useful for like figuring out what is slow and like optimizing your workflow. Generally speaking, you just start at that, right? Once everything runs, you'll see that the commands will be marked as completed, right? And I can view the result of one of the commands. I can look at the logs, just normal stuff, right? Nothing special with that, right? The important part is not that I can do that, but there is no focus on distribution here. All the things ran on 10 agents, or maybe fewer agents, you don't know, you shouldn't care. Whether you run it on 1 machine to 100 machines is irrelevant. That's why the only thing about distribution you see here is at the top. It just tells you save a lot of time, distribution was on, don't worry about it, right? And that's sort of the big premise, and that distribution shouldn't be something you focus on. It should just something that happens for you to make things fast, but generally speaking, you should spend 0 time optimizing for distribution, right? That's the purpose of the tool you use, right? And then once the CI is done, you can look at the stats and see in here, for example, the utilization of agents. You can see it's roughly even. Even is good. Uneven means there is more idle time, so higher clock time. And at the bottom, you see the CI pipeline. It only had 2 commands running, right? And they run in parallel. So this is pretty optimal, right? In a real project, you would see a bit messier setup, right? But generally speaking, you could use this information to figure out how to optimize the things better to achieve a more even utilization of your agents, right? And of course, it all goes, like it's set up to work with GitHub and other things like that, right? So that's the premise. So you have a CI config which is very small, a bit bigger for your project, but not much bigger, right? You can use it to power a repo of any size, and your CI config doesn't increase, right? So what I want you to think about is the mental model. The thought I want you to keep in your head is before S3, after S3 transition in handling static assets, right? This is the mental model. If you have that model in mind, I think that you will see why the value proposition is there, right? So before S3, what was happening, right, is that any app that managed file uploads had to dedicate a few senior engineers to handle file uploads, right? They would have to figure out, how to build a service, upload the stuff, store it, replicate it against regions. Just do a lot of interesting stuff in there to make file uploads and file serving fast, right? And it was all the work. And then the S3 model, doesn't have to be S3, but in general, this new generation of tools, S3 is one example of, right, comes along and says, forget about it. All the things still happen behind the scenes. We have to use machines to manage your file upload. There is storage somewhere. We replicate things, but don't worry about it. From your point of view, it's an infinitely large, flat set of files. You can write a file to it. You can read a file from it, right? And generally speaking, unless you hit some limits, right, and you can with partitions in S3, but it happens very rarely, you don't need to worry about underlying anything. The abstraction doesn't link that much, right? So before that, best engineers, one-punch man kind of characters had to work on it for like months, right? Now an intern can write in a day, right? That's the difference. And once you compare it, you will see why like the S3 model, the metaphor kind of works, right? And that in the current world, CI is very machine-oriented, right? We look at every machine and we give a recipe to every machine like we used to do with file uploads, right? Now we don't do it, right? With the Nextcloud workflows, your CI is command-oriented. It doesn't matter how many machines run your stuff. It's an implementation detail. What matters is what commands you want to run, right? It's a lot more higher level. The configuration has to be smaller, a lot smaller, and it works with monorepos, right? That's the model, the Nextcloud workflows model, that how it compares to a traditional CI model, right? Okay, so I'll do a few highlights, right? So you see why it is cool, hopefully, and you'll be convinced. Here you go. The one thing that's a problem is that in traditional CI, it's called here legacy CI. Legacy can mean a good thing, right? But not in this case. In this case, it means bad. So, you tend to allocate the same number of agents to run compute. Not all the time, but most projects I know of, right, do that. It's always like 20 agents. It just is what it is, right? It runs because it's hard to vary that, right? So the result is that you either allocate too many agents, you waste money, a lot of money, or you allocate too few agents and things are just super slow at times, right? So what you want to do is to have a variable number of agents based on historical data that we collect and the impact of your PR, of your commit, right? If we know the commit is big and like 3/4 of your workspace is affected, we actually know the timings for every task that we're going to run. We can predict really well how many agents we need to allocate to make sure your CI runs under, say, 20 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever the number is, right? So that's one thing that matters a lot and can save you a lot of compute, right? And can make things faster as well. The second part that traditional CI/legacy CI has is that you tend to have, I mean, this is a graphic, but you can imagine the CI system that roughly visualize things in this way. Is that you have different stages in your CI, right? And if those stages run in sequence, right, which they often do, right, pretty much everywhere, right? Every stage in that sequence will have its own setup cost. Let's say it's 3 minutes, not that crazy, right? And those will add up. So if you have 4 stages, this is not like, you can have many more than 4 stages, right? Just add them up. You have 12 minutes of just waste, right? Nothing was running. You just cloning npm installing sequentially, you know? That's pretty crazy. Another interesting point is that in a traditional model, right, agents aren't reusable, right? So every agent has a particular recipe and it does the thing that it needs to do, right? And the problem with a non-reusable agent model is that if one of the agents fails, like the setup fails, you know, cache restoration didn't work. Surprisingly happens very often. I don't understand how that is the case, right? Your whole CI will fail. Because remember, agents are not reusable. If 1 out of 50 agents fails, right, the whole CI fails. If the chance of a failure is 0.1%, you're like, okay, that's not too high, 1 in 1,000. But you need to multiply, like, there is a power in there, right? So suddenly, every 20th CI run just fails because one of the agents is going to fail. That's a problem, right? And it goes further. The whole reusability part is much more impactful than people think, right? Because people never, like, just probability is something that we don't consider as much, right? So imagine your CI is slow, right? So like you have 50 agents, and there is a small chance, a 1% chance that one of the agents is going to be slow and will slow down your CI run by 20%. Well, you know, you have 50 agents. Again, you do the thing, is like half of your CI, more than half of your CI runs are going to be slow now, right? It kind of disallows granular retries, right? If you run in an end-to-end, like imagine you have 50 end-to-end test projects you run, not that crazy for a large repo, 50 things you run, right? And one of them fails. So what should happen in this case, right? Really, your CI system should know, based on previous historical data, that this particular target tends to be flaky. Like we do know, how do we know? Because we have the same hash, and we can collect and say, when you run end-to-end test for, credit card thing or whatever, right? Once in a while, the same hash yields different results. The same computation hash. Because the same hash yields different results, the target tends to be flaky. Here you go. You can rerun the target on the spot without doing anything else. Just send it to a different agent, right? Or something like that. It doesn't matter, right? And as a result, if you imagine end-to-end tests tend to be very flaky, right? If you have end-to-end tests that are even slightly flaky, if you have many of them, you're going to have like half of your CRNs failing for the flaky reasons, which you have to rerun, right? Easily fixable once you start treating agents as reusable and you actually understand about what commands do, which Cloud does. Right? So the result of all of this, right, is that the CI time, the clock time, right, the human, what we perceive, right, gets reduced by a lot, right? We had some experiment with the real repos, right? Highly optimized distributed setup, super smart engineers, right? Sitting there, making it work, right? Enable something that appears more naive, right? 30% faster CI time, because the idle time is very hard to optimize away manually, right? It's much easier for an orchestrator like an Nxcloud to do it, right? And in addition to making the things faster, more robust, it also decreases the amount of config. This is actually a real project we had, right? And the numbers is different from project to project, right? But your CI config goes from like 900 lines or whatever, 870. It's actually not that bad, right? You can easily have 10 times as much if you have a proper enterprise mega repo, right? But the point being is that it decreases to something that is small, right? 70 lines, 100 lines, and most of it becomes kind of trivial to look at. Even if it's 100 lines, mostly it's like 30 lines of environment setup. It's like, this is like, so the thing that actually, they may look like a lot of lines, but they don't require maintenance, right? They're just there, right? So the CI config goes down by a lot. It goes down and becomes identical for small and large repos. That's a property we're trying to achieve with that. If you have a small repo built by 5 engineers, the CI config will be roughly the same size as a 10 times, 100 times bigger repo, right? because you just don't need to worry about things being fast and scalable, right? It just happens for you. So that's a cool thing. We have two ways to, like everything I showed kind of imply that your CI goes away. And I understand that you have a warm place in your heart for your CI, for Jenkins in particular, and which is fine. This is fine. I'm not here to judge necessarily. So you can keep your Jenkins, right? In this case, the way you can think about it is that Jenkins can do this stuff like figuring out what commands to run, and maybe handling approvals, integration with SonarQube or whatever, things like that, right? That some of the outside stuff, right? And the whole compute will run using Nextcloud workflows. So if you used to use 50 agents on Jenkins to do it, now it would be 1 agent, right, per CI run, and 49, or actually a much smaller number, Nextcloud will manage for you, right? So you could keep your Jenkins and just reduce it to such a small configuration that you almost won't see it. Right? Distribution will still be there. Right? So it's available. We're actually using Prod already for a few closed source and open source projects, including Nx. The Nx repo runs on it. Right? It's available for enterprise clients today. And if you want to get access to it, you need to subscribe to our newsletter, and then we'll let you know when you can use it. Thank you.